report of this witness, Dr. Sestrovic, and the other is a binder of 30 exhibits. We could ask the numbers be assigned.
Your Honor's expert report will be marked Exhibit 636, and the binder of exhibits will be 637.
Your Honor, in the interest of saving time, the prosecution wishes to withdraw 3 exhibits from the binder, which is now 637. Those are exhibits, or tabs 6, 16, and 28. I apologize that the curriculum vitae in tab 1 is also included in the expert report, so the prosecution will be withdrawing the second copy of that was included in tab 1. Sir, can I ask you to begin your testimony by telling us your full name?
Berko Zečević.
And the chamber has a full record of your educational and professional background before it now. Can I ask you just to summarize in a sentence or two what your field of expertise is?
Ja sam imao 2 pravca svoje specijalizacije.
I specialized in 2 fields. Education, that is to say, teaching at the Faculty of Mechanical Engineering, and also my expert work in the field of designing ammunition.
Your Honor, at this time, if it's acceptable to the court, I will read a summary of what it is that is contained in the expert report, and then proceed with my questions regarding some other matters of fact that the witness has information regarding.
Have you a copy of that document, or is it your own personal summary that you're going to read?
Just a summary that I have some speaking notes of the summary of that. It's not an official document.
Yes.
This witness, a mechanical engineer, is a highly qualified expert in heavy weapons technology of the former Yugoslavia, and prior to the war in Bosnia and Herzegovina, he was involved in the design of heavy weapons, including the 120 millimeter mortar for the JNA. During the war, he assisted the Bosnian and Herzegovina government with a weapons production industry. His full statement as an expert pursuant to Rule 94 bis reports on the operation and effect of the 120 millimeter mortar round and the shelling of Markali Market in Sarajevo on the 5th of February, 1994. At that time, he had volunteered to participate in the investigation of the shelling of the market and was appointed by the local investigating judge as part of a team of engineers who analyzed the physical evidence and prepared a study on the shelling. His analysis concluded in part the following. 1, that the 120 millimeter mortar round exploded upon impact with the surface of the ground in the market, and that the tail stabilizer fin of that mortar was found lodged in the center of the crater created by the mortar. That his analysis determined that it came from the northeast direction in an azimuth of 18 degrees plus or minus 2 degrees. Third, that there were 6 possible locations from which the shell could have been fired from. Fourth, that of those 6 locations, only the closest one of those sites was under the control of the government of Bosnia and Herzegovina Army at the time. The other 5 possible locations were in territory controlled by the Army of Republika Srpska. Fifth, that UNPROFOR personnel interviewed stated that they had not observed a single projectile fired from the area controlled by the Army of Bosnia and Herzegovina at a time relevant, and that it would be impossible to hide the sound of the firing of a 120 millimeter mortar in that area or in that controlled area, therefore concluding that the round must have been fired from one of the other 5 locations. 6, that it is scientifically possible that one 120 millimeter mortar shell was able to kill the large number of people that it did kill on that day. And finally, that the lack of color on the tail stabilizer fin as recovered indicates most probably that it was manufactured in the Pretis Arms Manufacturing Plant in Vagoshka or Marko Oreskovic in Lici Ozik in Croatia, both of which were under the control of the Army of Republic of Srpska at the relevant time. This expert also reports upon and explains scientific research that indicates that the tail stabilizer fin of the Yugoslav 120 millimeter mortar round would not begin to lodge into the ground if fired on charges 1 and 2, and that it would be unlikely to lodge if fired with 3 charges, and would begin to lodge if fired with 4, 5, or 6 charges. On the basis of this research, it can be concluded, or he has concluded, that the round was fired from Bosnian Serb-controlled territory. Your Honor, I will now ask the witness regarding matters relevant to his time working in the Pretis factory. Sir, could I ask you to summarize the number of years that you worked in the Pretis factory?
Radio sam 17 godina.
I worked there for 17 years.
And during the time that you were there, did you become familiar with the paperwork of the Pretis factory, as well as correspondence that regularly transpired between Pretis, other munitions factories, and the J&A?
Ja sam bio u odeljenju za istraživanje.
I was in the Department for Research and Development of the Pretis factory. That is actually the nucleus in terms of the operation of that factory. That is to say, manufacturing ammunition. There were 30 to 50 of us employed in that department, depending on the year. And, of course, we all had the opportunity of seeing how our colleagues developed. The most responsible people for designing, testing, and introducing ammunition in the Yugoslav People's Army were us. And of course, we were present in the manufacturing phase, in the testing and experimental stage. And since this was our very own country at the time, we were all pleased if we could help the Yugoslav People's Army as much as possible.
So can I ask you specifically regarding the paperwork that was generated typically by the Pretis factory, as well as written correspondence between it and the Yugoslav People's Army and other munitions factory. During the course of your employment there, did you become familiar with such documents?
Pošto sam ja bio jedan od...
Since I was one of the constructors of the 128 millimeter rocket M87, I went through all stages of its design and its introduction in the Yugoslav People's Army, so it was only logical that I had to be.
Just in the interest of time, if you're able to answer yes or no, I would appreciate that. Were you familiar with the documents?
Da.
Yes, 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 fully, fully.
Over the course of the last several days, were you asked to look at some documents from the Pretis factory?
Svakako.
Certainly, yes.
I ask at this time, if it pleases the court, that the binder of 637 be placed before the witness so that he can tab through the large number of documents I will ask him to comment on during the course of his testimony.
Yes, we'll get a number for that.
637, Your Honor.
Sir, Sir, can I ask you to turn to tab 2 of that binder? And my question to you, is that a summary of your observations regarding the documents that you were asked to look at while here in The Hague?
Da.
Yes.
Before I ask you about any specific document, can I ask you in a few sentences to describe for the chamber what was the pre-war structure of the munitions and weapons industry in Yugoslavia?
Vojna industrija
The military industry of the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia was very well organized with clear competences of all the participants involved. In the process of designing, there were two possibilities. It was done either by the Military Technological Institute in Belgrade or by individual factories. Ammunitions factories were mostly located in Bosnia-Herzegovina and Serbia. Ammunition was tested in Nikinci in Serbia. Decisions on whether anything should be developed in the field of ammunition was passed by the Military Technical Council of the Yugoslav People's Army. Such a decision would be adopted by the Council too. And the technical division of the Federal Secretary for National Defense passed the further relevant decisions, and therefore all the competences were clearly outlined. I have to point out one more thing. For a long time, the rule was that there would be a clear division in terms of what each factory should do. For a long time, there had been no parallelism in production. It appeared only towards the very end, towards the 1980s. Before that, the entire organization was at a very high level. Foreign trade was conducted by the SDPR. The factories themselves did not have the right to sell their products on their own.
Can I ask you to describe for us, what was the significance of the Pretis factory itself? How large a factory and what quantity of munitions did it produce?
kičma svake vojske.
The backbone of any army are the artillery units, in addition to infantry units. But the main strikes are carried out by the artillery units. The Pretis factory produced artillery ammunition from 76 millimeters to 155 millimeters, rocket ammunition of 128 millimeters, air bombs of 250 millimeters. So this was a highly respectable factory, perhaps among the largest such factories in Europe for the manufacturing of ammunition. Interpreters note, could the witness kindly be asked to speak slower?
Sir, the interpreters are asking if you could speak a little bit slower. Doctor, the chamber has heard evidence about the withdrawal of the Yugoslav People's Army from Bosnia-Herzegovina on the 19th of May, 1992. Did you discover a document dated after that time which indicated to you an ongoing relationship between the Yugoslav Army, as it was then called, and the Pretis factory? And I'd ask you to turn to tab 3. And if I could ask that the first page of that document be placed on the overhead projector. Sir, do you recognize the document that's contained in 637, tab 3?
Da.
Yes.
Was that a document that you yourself located or found?
Da.
Yes.
Can you summarize for the chamber what it is that is stated in that document?
U ovom dokumentu predsjednik
In this document, the president of the Community of Military Industries of Yugoslavia, Mr. Jovan Jovičić, proposes that directors be appointed for various factories, namely Rudi Čajevec, Pretis, and Famos, special vehicles. All of these factories at that time were under the control of the Army of Republika Srpska.
And what does this document purport to do?
Uobičajeno je bilo
It was customary in the former Yugoslavia that the appointment of directors would be carried out, or rather, agreement would be sought from the Federal Secretariat for National Defense, although it was the Workers' Council that actually carried out the appointment. However, not a single case was registered of appointing a director within the military industry without having consulted the Federal Secretariat for National Defense beforehand and without receiving their agreement. In this particular case, objectively speaking, Bosnia-Herzegovina had attained independence, so it would have been illogical to have this done by the then Federal Secretariat for National Defense. At that point in time, this was proposed by an organization that still operated, and that was the Community of the Military Industries of Yugoslavia, and it was headed by its president, Jovan Jovičić.
Sir, does this document, through the mechanism you've just described, propose a candidate to be the manager of the Pretis factory?
da.
Yes.
And who does it propose should be the manager of the Pretis factory now located in Bosnia-Herzegovina?
Za direktora fabrike Pretis
Mr. Milorad Motika, with a degree in engineering, was proposed to be director of the Pretis factory.
I now ask that you look at tab 4 of 637 and ask that page 1 of the English copy of that document be placed on the overhead projector. So this is a document dated the 18th of June, 1992. Can I ask you to summarize what this document is? And can I ask you also to read the conclusion or finding under Roman numeral 1?
pod ovim poglavljem 1
Under Roman numeral 1, problems are spelled out because those problems were due to the fact that there was a conflict in the territory of Bosnia-Herzegovina. And also,
Sorry to interrupt you. Are you sure that you're looking at tab number 4? I believe you're referring to tab number 5 at the moment.
Izvinjavam se.
I am sorry. Tab 4. This refers to the appointment of the manager of the Vogošća Pretis Holding. Jovo Vučić, the previous manager, was dismissed, and Milorad Motika, with a degree in engineering, was appointed manager of the Vogošća Pretis Holding. And this was signed by Prime Minister, Professor Dr. Branko Đerić.
Does this indicate that the recommendation for general manager of Pretis made through the mechanism of the Federal Secretariat was adopted by the management or by the Pretis, or was it enacted for the Pretis factory?
Pa.
What is it?
Well, the question put by Mr. Groom is unfair because he said the proposal was made through the Federal Secretariat. And this is no proposal of the Federal Secretariat. This is a proposal of a business association that is called the Community of Military Industries and the Manufacturers of Military Equipment. This had existed for years in Yugoslavia. It consisted of the managers of military industry factories. So it has nothing to do with the government, and therefore Mr. Groom is putting a question that is quite wrong.
Let us have it clarified.
Sir, can I ask you to clarify what was the relationship between the organization that authored this document that's in tab 3 and the federal organs having to do with the military in Yugoslavia?
Činjenica da zajednica
The fact that the military industries community for Yugoslavia existed several years and that it had been established with a view to resolving some of the common problems in the functioning of the military industry. And it served the following purpose. When exports were made, then joint positions were taken. However, it was not customary for this business community to propose its head. It was always the Federal Secretary for National Defense that gave its approval. Also, the appointment of this director could not have been made on the basis of an independent decision. It wasn't that the managers would meet and appoint another manager. This had to go through the Federal Secretariat for National Defense. My opinion is, if I can put it that way, that at this point in time it was illogical for the Federal Secretariat for National Defense to put forth a proposal again. So use was made of this community, which still existed, and they proposed Mr. Motika to be the general manager. My opinion is that there was no synchronization in this process as there had been before.
Now, I want to draw your attention to April 1992. During that month, did you cease to work at the Pretis factory?
da ja sam 17. aprila
Yes, on the 17th of April, I stopped working there.
Can I ask you to briefly describe why it was you stopped working on the 17th of April in 1992?
prethodnih dana je bilo
In the days before, there was great tension and shooting in the area of Sarajevo. That week,
ponovo počeli da rade tvornice i
factories resumed their work, and on that day, I came to the factory with a very small number of other colleagues because I thought it impossible for a conflict to break out in Bosnia and Herzegovina, so I came to work in the morning to the factory. It was around noon or 1 p.m., and all of a sudden there was complete silence.
taj kompleks u sebi i svakodnevno primao negde od 5 do 7.000 ljudi.
This big complex, this factory, employed every day several thousand people, and there was always hum and noise, and you could feel it working. However, this was complete silence, and looking through the window of my office, I saw people leaving the factory en masse. I remained there for another couple of hours, and at a certain point I left my office because none of my colleagues arrived to work that day. Although the R&D department was the most important one in the whole factory, there was no director, no senior staff, nobody was there. Then I left the factory, and a couple of days later, it was impossible to go in the factory anyway, because the JNA had entered the complex.
I can now draw your attention to after the conflict did in fact begin. Can I ask you to summarize for the chamber the situation with respect to munitions that would have been faced by the early Army of Republic of Srpska?
Tvornica Pretis je
The Pretis factory had in its production program a continuous process. At all times, it was producing a significant amount of ammunition. It is a huge complex, and part of its storage facilities were used for storing the reserves of the Yugoslav People's Army. It contained a lot of semi-finished products, not ready-made weapons, but parts of assemblies that can easily be put together. The stockpile was enough for about 5 or 6 months of production.
Can I ask you perhaps to simply list what, if any, problems the munitions industry at that time in the Republic of Srpska would have faced?
Ja mogu samo da kažem sa kojim problemom.
I can say what were the potential problems in Pretis in Republika Srpska, because it was the main factory in that area. First of all, there was the problem of supply with energy, power, supply of steam and coal, because that was necessary for the production. And since the military industry was a unified body, no single factory could work alone, so that the factory of rockets and rocket fuels in Vitez was under the control of HVO at the moment. The factory of igniting devices in Bugojno was under the control of HVO, and that created significant problems in putting together the production. And then also there occurred problems in providing inputs for the production of ammunition.
Sir, could I ask you now to turn to tab 5 of 637? This is a document entitled, it's from the Republic of Srpska, Ministry of Industry and Energetics, and it's titled Information on Current Problems of Military Industry of the Republic of Srpska, and it's dated the 26th of November, 1992. Have you had an opportunity to review this document, and does it fairly and accurately represent some of the problems that would have been faced by the military and munition suppliers in the Republic of Srpska during this early part of the war?
Vidio sam ovaj dokument I
I have seen this document, and I agree completely that this is a realistic assessment.
Now going to ask you to turn to tab 7 of 637. You made some mention of raw materials. Can I ask you to describe in a little greater detail what types of raw materials did the Pretis factory depend upon that would have become or did become unavailable in the latter part of 1992 and continuing on into 1993?
u proizvodnji municije
In the production of ammunition, there is a series of raw materials that are necessary. One of the important components is steel that was supplied from Slovenia, Croatia, or from Nikšić, and Zenica, which means Bosnia and Herzegovina. Furthermore, rocket fuels for rocket artillery systems are very important as well. Such fuels could be supplied from the Vitez factory, which was then under the control of HVO, or from the Lučane factory in Serbia. I have to emphasize that fuels from the Vitez and Lučani factories were not compatible, but were used only for certain types of ammunition. A special problem were fuses and capsules. For the production of cartridges, one needs brass Copper is needed from Serbia,
Kompletnu situaciju veoma je
and
otežano bilo.
bearing in mind the overall situation, production in Pretis was made very difficult unless we could complete the supply of all the inputs.
Želio bih naglasiti
Eksploziv je kao posebno
Explosives were a special problem. They were also supplied from Serbia.
Now, asking you to draw your attention to tab 7 of 637, this is a document dated